Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is John. I'm with FNP Wargamers, and this is our FNP, not our morning show, it's our evening show. We haven't done the evening show a lot lately, past few months, because all sorts of reasons. I'm not going to go into them all, but today is going to be like the first really kind of an official run. Yesterday, I did a test run on doing dual streaming to YouTube and to oh gosh, what am I on Twitch here? So it everything was successful. We had a good run. No problems with our feed or anything else. So really excited about that. So we're going to go over today the Ultramodern 5. Ultramodern 5 is a 5th edition game system, and I'll get to 5th edition in just a second. That basically takes you bypass doing all the high fantasy style with magic and dragons and whatnot, and you put it into a modern setting from about the 18th century all the way up to the far-flung future. Excuse me. So we'll go over all the differences, what separates this from Dungeons and Dragons, which this is based on. Dungeons and Dragons has been around since the 70s, even when it was Chainmail, and then it became Dungeons and Dragons, and it's gone through many iterations. And right now we are on 5th edition, which has seen an explosion across multimedia outlets, YouTube, Discord. We're seeing all sorts of toys, video games. I mean, it has just exploded on the multicultural scene for society. We're seeing people from all walks of life, celebrities, doctors, lawyers, the regular guys and gals. That's all of us, unless you are, of course, a doctor, celebrity, or anything else. We're all coming together to play this role-playing game based around Dungeons and Dragons and this new edition. And it has gotten so popular. It was right now, at least in 2019, I did not check, that's my bad, but I believe 2018 probably also, it is the #1 selling role-playing game. This new edition is just so unbelievably intuitive and easy to use that people have hey, good evening, Epion. People are finding it easy to play, easy to learn. We're seeing families get together to play Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and many other role-playing games like Kids on Bikes, Tales from the Loop. Tales from the Loop, you guys will be hearing about again in the very near future. That'll be my next show. Tales from the Loop is getting an Amazon TV show. Believe it or not, and it's going to be bonkers crazy. If you really loved Stranger Things, or even kind of mildly like Stranger Things, you will like Tales from the Loop. In fact, you can go to YouTube and watch the teaser trailer for Tales from the Loop, and we'll be covering that RPG in the very near future, maybe even next week. So today we're going to cover Ultramodern 5. This is their 5th version, essentially. It is designed for 5th edition, the 5th edition rule set. You do need at least the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. Not for all the classes or the races, the magic, or any of that equipment or anything. You need it for the rules. The one thing that they could not publish in this book is the actual rule set, how you play the game. So everything else is changed, and everything else is different. The only thing that you need out of that player's handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Monster's Manual is just the rule set. You don't need the magic, the characters, anything like that. Just the rules, the mechanics of how you play the game. Ultramodern, the book will take care of everything else. Now, this was on a Kickstarter last year, and it was a very successful Kickstarter. They were like about $68,000 over goal, which is really good for an RPG. Excuse me. And this was so popular that right now you can only get it on Drive-Thru RPG. It's right now the book's gone to print. However, the printing press is in China, so there's going to be a bit of a delay on when we're going to get it. Probably going to be summertime, to be totally honest. However, you can go to drivethrurpg.com and you can purchase this. I believe it's $20. and for the digital download, you get all the maps, artwork, everything else, plus the core rules itself. And the core rule book itself, whether it's going to be in print or digital, is over 400 pages. It is a monster book, and we're going to try to cover as much as I possibly can. I'm going to glaze over some things. I'm going to get really detailed on others. So this is really just an overall review. Now, I want people to understand that this game is not a simple reskinning. For those familiar with the computer term or the gaming term, putting a new skin over something of Dungeons and Dragons. This is a completely brand new rule set with new classes, new races, new everything that makes it truly unique as compared to Dungeons and Dragons. Now, just so everybody knows, and I'll say this probably several times, is I am streaming this to YouTube and to Twitch. So if I don't get to your comment right away, just give me a moment or two before I switch back over, because I've got to tab over and take a look at the comments. Like Epion just got a couple things here. The Go Hards don't like it, but they don't go outside often, mostly because they think it's too easy and don't have fun playing. Yeah, I've seen this, but didn't look into it. Also didn't know it was an offshoot of D&D. Yes, Epion, it is for those of you that are not on Twitch, talking to Epion32, it is an offshoot of D&D. You still need that rule set, but I'm telling you that this game is truly unique. We did a very rough calculation. When you make your character class, and don't let this freak some of you people out, that there are about just shy of 35,000 possible combinations of making a character. And that's with us not including adding in the backgrounds and your birth rate, or your what things that happen for like your siblings, your family and everything, your background information. So just based off character generation, there's at least 35,000 different possible combinations. And it exceeds all expectations, where Dungeons and Dragons is still kind of limited. You have to stay in your lane, so to speak. This one, you get to go outside of that lane and really push your creative limits. Now, this game, it's very generic in a sense, is that it doesn't have a set setting, a campaign setting like Forgotten Realms or Planescape or anything like that. But they do include several campaign settings, so if you want to get involved. They also list a number of other ones in just brief blurbs. They talk about the Omniverse, or Multiverse, if you want to jump around. This game, especially for you console players, this game system allows you to, if you like Fallout, you want to play Fallout, you could easily make a Fallout game based off of this. If you love loot and shoot style games like Borderlands, and we're going to get to this in the equipment section, you can make yourself a Borderlands style game. I am not kidding. All those crazy loot combinations, getting a Toreador SMG with all these different options and abilities, it's possible in this game. It is very easy to really make up your own game system. And now they have some of their own published campaign settings, like Apex, if you want to do like a superhero based one that is not a part of this, but you can use it. You can add it into the Ultramodern 5 setting, or you can use it as a standalone. Once again, you still have to use the 5th edition rule set. That's one of those little things that they say you have to use. All right, so let's get talking about this. As I check all the different chats here. Cool. All right. Now, like I said, I'm going to be jumping back and forth between the chats. I'm going to be watching my stream info, because I'm now streaming a dual cast onto 2 different streaming platforms, having multiple windows open, and I'm waiting for my computer to either start smoking or we're going to get through it just fine. So let's get on with this. Now, I'm going to go over essentially almost every chapter. There's 2 chapters I'm going to leave out. The first chapter is really explaining pretty much what I just did about what Ultramodern is, given a timeline of their different campaign settings. While they're doing a big long talk about the Omniverse and different wars that you can implement into your campaign setting if you want, whatever it is that you want to do. So we're just going to concentrate on the main chapters, especially for character generation. I'll spend a lot more time on character generation than I will some of the other sections, just because that's the bread and butter. That's what people want to know about. They want to know what type of character they can play. You know, you go over, hey, good evening, Nam. You go over to Dungeons and Dragons. You're going to get your wizards, your elf rangers, your half-orc barbarians. It's the same thing over and over again. It's a very high magic system. This one, the magic is way different. The classes, the races are way different. So let's talk about birth. Now, this is the start of character creation. Birth contains everything that you need to pick a race. You have a variety of racial options, 10 different races. I'm going to be looking down at my notes, so bear with me here. 10 different races. I'm going to read them off to you so you'll have an idea. Now, each of these races also has a variant. If you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, they have variant races or variants of all the races. So like human, for example, there's a human and then there's a variant human where it's nothing different necessarily. It's just statistic wise or special ability wise, it's slightly different. So you'll see this a lot. And another thing you are going to see from character race all the way up through archetypes, character classes, is a tier system with abilities. And you can, and I'm going to say it right now, and I'll probably reiterate it several times as we go. Whenever you have a tier ability, especially with whatever your character race is, you can sacrifice certain upgrades that you get later on. They're called advancements. So like at 4th level, 8th level, 12th level, every 4 levels after that, you can get an advancement that you can boost up your physical or mental attributes. You can sacrifice these or cash them in, if you will, to upgrade one of your racial abilities. And I'll give a great example here in just a moment. So the first one that they have is the automaton. So if you want to play a robot, an android, this is the most perfect one that you can do. They have a variety of upgrades that you can put. There are 2 different options. I believe it's 2 different options for the actual character race. So you're not just stuck with a very generic robot. And the next one after that, I'll get to in just. I'm trying to see if there is something else about the. I want to make sure I give you guys all the correct information. Automaton, yeah, there's different machine origins. The variants are the actual bona fide robot. The other one is the android. So there are multiple options for you to choose instead of just being an automaton. So essentially 3. And earlier when I said there's all these different possible combinations, this is where you're seeing those variants. So there's an automaton. And then if you don't like just that very generic race, they have the variants of robot and or the android. So you're going to see that all over the place with these races. So in reality, instead of 10 races, there's anywhere from 20 to 30 races, really, if you take that into consideration. So that 35,000 possible character combinations actually grows exponentially. So there's automaton, there's 2 different aliens, and I don't want to spoil what they are, but they're very creepy looking. They're not the type of aliens that you're going to really expect, little green men from outer space or anything else. They're really, I'd say, closer to, one is very close, the Kithin, I would say is very close to, if you ever watched any of the Alien movies. And then the other one is the Hondo or the Coney. Essentially a 4-armed, rear articulated alien with a big saucer head. I mean, it's the most bizarre creature I've ever seen with them, but it is a possible race. The next one is the animist. The animist. I'm trying to pronounce this correctly. The animist. If give you an idea, think about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Or there's a game out right now from Modifius called Mutant Year Zero. Essentially, somebody's done an experiment on an animal and made them humanoid. So those of you people that have a thing for animal or humanoid animal style characters, this is absolutely perfect for you. There's about almost 24 racial differences that you can do. I mean, they got everything from rabbits to lions to elephants. So you can pick yours, and each of these, like I said earlier, they have different traits that obviously not just physical, but also special abilities that you can give them, and you can upgrade these by either taking detrimental side effects or by sacrificing or cashing in your level advancements later on as your character levels up and advances during the course of the game. The next one we have is called the Altered. The best way to describe this is as very similar to being like a mutant. Not just like X-Men, Cyclops with his laser beam eyes, but more like Angel with his wings, or perhaps if you watch My Hero Academia, I cannot remember her name, Froppy. She's a gal that's kind of like a frog. She's got a long tongue that she can whip out, that sort of thing. So you choose your mutations, and each of those mutations can be leveled up. Like wings start out, okay, you can fly, you got some basic flight speed. You're not all that maneuverable, but the more of your level advancement that you invest into those wings, they become much better. You'll be able to fly faster, you'll be a lot more maneuverable. It might even offer you some sort of protection. You're going to see that all the time with these races. The next one, it's the Morpher, and this is more not necessarily a single entity. It's more like a colony of entities, like hundreds and multiples of cells. Venom would be a kind of a good example. Or there was a old Marvel villain, kind of a D-lister, but it's called Swarm. Basically, it's a sentient swarm of bees or wasps. I can't remember what it was, but essentially that's what you are. You can take different forms. You can even get to a point where you can alter your appearance to look like other people. And that's one of those other tiered abilities where you're going to level up if you choose to. You don't even have to. The next one we have is the Splicer. So the Animist earlier was an animal made humanoid or humanish. The Splicer is the opposite. They're a human that are made, their DNA is spliced with animal DNA or alien DNA to give them certain features or special abilities that an animal will have. Like give yourself cat eyes, so you have near night vision. Maybe you have lion claws, or maybe your jaw is articulated like a python. There's a huge variety of different abilities that you can splice together to make your splicer. Then we've got the last two. The tuner is the simplest to do. It doesn't have any variance whatsoever. But the tuner is somebody, and actually the picture that they use is what you're seeing on the screen right now. The tuner is somebody that is naturally predisposed genetically towards magic. And magic in this game is more of a scientific energy source is the best way to describe it, that can be measured, it can be siphoned, everything else. The tuner is just naturally, their body is naturally inclined towards it. So they don't need wands or spell books or magic talismans or anything. It just comes naturally to them. And even though they don't have to be a spellcaster, they do get benefits for taking a spell casting class, that like the Magi, which we'll get to in a little bit. The last one is the Yokai. Now, there's plenty of other games out there where you have Japanese style or even other cultures where you have people that can transform into an animal, like I think it's the Kitsune, or I think it's Kitsune in Japan, the fox lady. I can never remember how to pronounce the name, but in Japan there's a bit of a legend or lore myth about a woman that could turn into a spider and vice versa. it's that sort of thing. You essentially pick your nature, and then you get all sorts of benefits. You'll be able to transform into it, and it just gives you an extra little feel for that type of race. You have all your own benefits and bonuses, just like you're getting with all the other races. So everything has their own most unique feature. And like I said, this is not a simple reskinning of Dungeons and Dragons. Everything, even the human, even the basic human, which is one of the races that I skipped over, is customizable, and that does not look anything like the Dungeons and Dragons version of human. So let's, oops, sorry about that. So the next thing we're going to cover, this is still during character creation, is this section is called Life, as you can see there. Under the Life section, we are going to be covering, sorry, I'm going to hide that. There we go. We're going to cover essentially, and this is one of those one I'm going to glaze over. Life covers your background, and this is like I'm like a savant, or I was poor when I was being raised up, or I was orphaned, that sort of thing. That gives you a little bit of starting money, some extra skills and proficiencies, maybe some languages. It's nothing game altering. It's just a little bit of background, just like it's called, background, to help flesh out your character. Now in Dungeons and Dragons, you usually stop right there. You pick your background and then you move on. In this one, you don't just simply stop at the background. We're going to go into your life events. Who were your parents? Did you have siblings? How many siblings did you have? Are any of those siblings still alive? Were your parents murdered in an alley by somebody after you got done seeing a Zorro movie? You know what I'm talking about. And then you go, after you figure out your family background, you also take time to figure out some life experiences. Like, were there any tragedies? Did you get some financial windfalls? Or did something bad happen to you financially? And you went from being a billionaire with this national tech company to now you're dirt poor and you're living on the streets trying to get change from passerbyers. And, who were your friends? Who were your enemies? And now most people, this stuff won't really apply too much for their day-to-day gaming. You probably won't even care. You'll probably even forget about it. But it's a key thing for you to go ahead and just take the 2 or 3 minutes to roll the dice, figure out your background, and let your GM, that's your game master, for those not familiar, or if those of you familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, your dungeon master, so they can use that to help shape the overall story, the overall campaign, to occasionally be tailored towards you, being very specific to your story. Especially if you are playing a campaign that is an open sandbox, which I'm seeing a lot more I'm hearing from other groups that are going outside of Dungeons and Dragons. They're going to these more sandbox style games so they can really let loose on their own creativity and start choosing their own adventure instead of going on this campaign that's, it's a $50 book that you had to buy, and you're going from point A to point B, C, D, whatever, and there's not a lot of time to do what you really want because you're stuck on this adventure. So following this life section, following the life path, might not have any game effects initially, but it'll help out your GM. And later on, you might be like, oh yeah, I have a brother that is super rich. Let's reach out to him, that sort of thing. These things will help you eventually, or help your GM. You might be able to ignore them initially, but later on, it's going to come into play. All right, so once that section is done, once you're done with that, we're going to go into something different. Now, Dungeons and Dragons, you usually go from your race, you got your background, you go to your class. In Ultramodern 5, you are actually going to be adding on this thing called a ladder. And a ladder, we're like a class. Your class is more like your vocation. Like, I'm a fighter, I'm a soldier, I'm a wizard, Harry. The ladder is who you are. What is your motivations? What is your background? How your character goes through life. And Epion, you're absolutely right. those railroad campaigns are good for new players and GMs. So I should back up what I said. I am not bashing those. They are a lot of fun to play, but once you have played them multiple times, playing different campaigns, you might want something a little bit more open sandbox. Other groups, other players might not be comfortable with an open sandbox game, so they want to play the campaigns. So thank you for pointing that out at Beyond. I'm going to jump over real quick to check YouTube chat. All right, looks like most people are here on Twitch. Okay, so we're going over the ladder system. Now, the ladder, it's not just a simple bit of background. This is actually a mechanic that as your character levels up, this is not their class, this is just who they are, kind of like this is inspirational material. As you level up, you will get ability starting at first level all the way up to, I believe, till 18th level. You are going to be getting, every few levels, you're going to be getting something that benefits your character. It might be small and minor, like, hey, you get to what they call advantage. You might be able to roll 2 dice and choose the better of the 2. Or you might be able to swap, say, perhaps my character is not very strong, but I'm very quick. So I'm very good at stabbing people with a knife. So instead of using my strength to do extra damage, it's maybe because I'm so quick with the blade, I can, sit there and do like a Zorro cut and cause more damage, just like I could if I had extra strength behind it. So now my dexterity does extra damage. Then there's other abilities as you level up. Now this one, I'm going to read these off. I'm not going to delve too much into these, but I just want to be able to tell them. There's the Born Leader, the Juggernaut, the Performer, the Runner, the Savant, the Survivor, the Veteran, the Warrior, and much later on, not in this section here, but in the Magic section, there's the Occultist. In the Magic section, there's some different backgrounds, archetypes, and a class also, and there's a solid reason for them putting that there. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. So once you pick your ladder, and there's a reason for them doing this ladder, because the Dungeons and Dragons, you're getting something at pretty much every level with your character class. Here, you aren't getting everything necessarily with every level, or your abilities are a little bit more toned down. So to kind of balance out the game, what they are doing with this is by putting these ladders in to give you a much more diverse character. They're putting all these level gains that you will get some special abilities later on. So that's one of the very wonderful things. And this is another part of that 35,000 plus combinations you're going to be able to pull off with your characters. I should note that the ladder has no restrictions on race or vice versa. There might be a race that's better geared towards a ladder, maybe better geared towards a class, and all those different combinations, and they'll list those as, hey, you might want to try this class with this ladder, but you are not required to. They don't put any restrictions, which is one of the most wonderful things, especially a guy that likes to run and play in an open sandbox style RPG. I love as many options as possible so I can get a very unique character instead of just the typical half-orc barbarian. All right, so like I said, I'm not going to delve too much on ladder, but this is basically, it's kind of like I said, your disposition, who you are, what's your motivation, what it is that's driving you as a character. All right, so next is the one that most people really like. Excuse me 1 second as I take a drink. Running my mouth here, I get a little dehydrated. So the classes is where it's really kind of the bread and butter of any sort of role-playing game. This is what characters want. They want to be like, I want to be a fighter. I want to be a holy warrior. I want to be an assassin or a thief or some mighty wizard, dragon wizard, that sort of thing. The class is what really defines your character overall. I mean, yes, your race and your ladder, your background, those help shape your character. but the most defining thing that really sets players' characters apart is the class. And a class is kind of like a structured, for those of you not familiar with role-playing games, this is your job. This is who and what you are. Are you a wizard? Are you a knight? Are you a thief? So we're taking all those classes, we're throwing them out because we're doing Ultramodern 5. Now I'm going to go over all these different classes, and just keep in mind that I'm just doing a glaze over, and that the ladders, the backgrounds, and the races can have any combinations with any of these classes. So just keep that in mind. All right, so I'm going to kind of talk about each of them a little bit. I'm going to tell you my first one, my favorite one, which is going to be the first one we're going to talk about. Some of these are combat classes, and some of them are non-combat classes. Some of you might be like, why would I want to play a non-combat class? It's not that they're not able to do combat. They just don't do combat as well as the others. What they are good at is providing buffs to your characters, or providing detriments to the enemy, running through the battlefield, resurrecting people, or not resurrecting, but healing them, inspiring others, so sort of things. Now you will see some parallels between, say, a fighter and a soldier, or a wizard and a magi, and they're going to be parallels. But I assure you, as you look through this book and you look through these classes, you will see instantly the severely distinct differences between Dungeons and Dragons and Ultramodern 5. And I mean, it's definitely not a reskin of 5e. And I really want to stress that, because I don't want people like, well, it's just wizards and paladins in modern day. No, definitely not. All right, so my first one, it's my favorite. I have no idea why it's my favorite, but, well, probably I know why, because I look at it as being the everyman or every woman, the everyday person. It's called the civilian. And it doesn't sound cool, doesn't sound fresh and awesome, doesn't have all the kind of edgy name to it. I mean, civilian. But the civilian, I look at, as I read the class, is very similar to what I would consider John McClane from the greatest Christmas movie, Die Hard. That's how I feel about the civilian. You are just the average guy stuck in a crazy situation, and you are displaying immense amounts of luck, and that's their real main special advantage that they have over other classes. They are very lucky. They get to have these bonus dice that they can use to alter their dice or alter their opponent's dice rolls. So the civilian, I think, is really cool. This would be one of those non-combatant classes. They can still fight. They still have proficiencies in firearms, and you can get brass knuckles or power fist, whatever your setting allows. You're not restricted to that. They just are kind of a catch-all. They are the everyman. They fit. They're such a wonderful role to fit into this game. They're really my favorite one. The next one is the face. This is your talker, your smooth talker, your con man. If you've watched the A-Team, either the original A-Team or the new A-Team, the face man is, well, he's the face. And that could be very well where they got that from. They have a wonderful ability, kind of like the civilian's lucky. This one is called hustle, or your hustler bonus. Essentially, you can use your dice to alter, essentially I would say alter the story. You can create interactions between opponents, or even like these arch nemesis or your enemies, and be able to talk them down from wanting to slaughter everybody, maybe even convincing them to not only just let you go, but maybe even side with you. The hustler, or the face, is another one of those, really not so much of a combatant, but they're definitely one that can help not only drive the story, but really boost some of the deficiencies that you often see in groups, especially in Dungeons and Dragons, where people will be like heavy. You have a whole bunch of heavy combat. You'll have a couple heavy spellcasters, and then somebody is stuck being a healer, but you have nobody that can talk. nobody that can interact and calm things down or get special information out of, or be able to talk their way through past a security guard, that sort of thing. And that's where the face really comes in handy. The grounder, and you're hearing me right, the grounder is the next one. This is a real frontline fighter. He can also be kind of a support role, but he is like a commando. He's got all sorts of bonuses to using weaponry, mainly rifles, pistols, grenades, that sort of thing. This is very similar to what you would consider to be your fighter, but it's definitely not your fighter. Something I should say, that when you're looking at all these classes, when you guys put together your group, you all should really take time to communicate who's going to be what in your group. That way, not necessarily forcing somebody to play a role they don't want to play, but playing making sure that you guys don't all of a sudden have 5 civilians or 3 civilians and 2 grounders, and now you got these big gaping holes, which still could be fun, but it could lessen the overall gaming experience. So one of the other things about the grounder that I really liked is they have like stack bonuses towards weaponry, and you'll see that weapons in this game, especially guns, are not as powerful as they are in Dungeons and Dragons. And mainly that is because these classes, like the grounder, the gunslinger that I'm going to get to next, you can use your special abilities to boost your ranged attacks with the weapons. So all of a sudden, the guns that don't look too lethal become extremely lethal in this system. But we'll get to that in a little bit. The gunslinger is the next class. If you have not seen it, or if you have seen it, I definitely recommend you watch it. The Christian Bale movie, the Equilibrium, or not the Equilibrium, but it's just Equilibrium. The gunslinger is very similar to that. You can generate these things called kata points, and you can spend these points to pull off special maneuvers with your handguns. And that's what it is. This is another one of those combat classes. You might not be running around with assault rifles, grenade launchers, heavy armor, but you are essentially flitting about the battlefield and doing ricochet shots, or kneecapping people, or doing all sorts of crazy maneuvers. I'm not going to go into super detail on it, but the gunslinger is definitely what you consider a DPS class, damage per second style class. You do a lot of damage, where the grounder is kind of gung fu. Thank you, Nam. Where the grounder is more of a overall fighter, a soldier with heavier armor and high rate of fire weapons, a little bit heavier weapons, not heavy weapons, but a little bit heavier than pistols. The gunslinger is moving around the battlefield, avoiding lots of damage and dishing it out. So I really like the gunslinger. It's my second favorite because I'm a pistol guy, and whenever I play RPGs that are modern, or even playing games on a console, I love having pistols. Usually to my detriment, because I should be getting shotguns or assault rifles, that sort of thing, but I love pistols. So the next one we got, this is a very interesting one. Very similar to the grounder in the sense that it's a frontline fighter. They're called the heavy. These are the guys that wear the heaviest armor. They bring the heaviest guns. These are your guys, big muscle, beefy guys or gals with mini guns. They're essentially your fire support. They might have artillery, like pop it off missile launchers. Think about them as in the movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando, when he's got shotguns and he's pulling out full automatic machine guns, or he's got that box missile launcher, which I don't even know what the hell that is, but essentially that is the heavy, and you get, of course, bonuses for using all those weapons. The infiltrator is the next one, and I don't want you thinking of him, well, this sounds like an assassin or a thief. It's a lot more than that. I mean, their biggest thing is about spying, it's about espionage. It is about being super sneaky. You do get some thief-like abilities, but it's definitely kind of the opposite. Instead of being a pickpocket or a burglar, it's more of like being a spy. It's more like being James Bond. The next one is the Marshal, and this is well, they're the law. This is playing a not. This is like playing Wyatt Earp. This is not like John McClane. That's more like civilian. The Marshal, it's like you see those movies. It was The Last Stand with Arnold Schwarzenegger, or any of the Wyatt Earp style movies. These guys have a commanding presence. Yeah, they can dish out damage with their pistols or long rifles, whatnot, but it's really how they inspire others and demoralize your opponents. They're kind of a little bit more towards the non-combatant side, but they're definitely able to put out the damage. They're just not at the same level as the gunslinger or the grounder or heavy. All right, the next one is another one of my favorites. Forget what you know about the monk from Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to be talking about the martial artist. Think more of the martial artists as modern day fighters, your MMA fighters. The combat is a lot more lethal, and they have this wonderful, well, they have a bunch of abilities, but they have this wonderful ability called combos. And as you go and attack your opponent, as you sit there and do these strikes, do your attacks, and as you're landing these attacks, you are setting up combos to pull off. And as you pull off these combos, you can deliver eventually deliver a finishing move. But there's combo attacks that you can do along the way that do more damage or have interesting effects, like maybe knee breaker or maybe head cracker. I don't know. Can't remember all of them, but it's basically good idea is Marvel versus Capcom fighting game. Pulling off your combos to pull off your finishing move, or Mortal Kombat where your character has to do, up, downs, all around, whatever, hit certain button sequence to pull off the combos to deliver the most maximum amount of damage, stun your opponent, and then be able to use a finishing move to deal out massive amounts of damage. So the martial artist is most certainly not the monk. This is more of a modern day brutal pit fighter or MMA style fighter. Maybe a little bit along the line street fighter, I'd say. So next one, probably a little bit more non-combatant. The medic. It's kind of like your scientist, your doctor. It's kind of an all-around in that scientific and medical field. They have the special ability called medical exploit, where you can basically run around the battlefield or run around a situation and basically spend these exploits to perform life-saving maneuvers or boosting health or hit points for your fellow characters, your fellow players. The medic is definitely, especially since you don't have a lot of magic, you don't have your clerics or druids or paladins with their healing spells, the medic is really a choice character to take. And they do have some combat abilities, but just not as high as others. All right, we're getting to the two of the last two. The Magi we're going to talk about later. The next two is the Sniper, which the Sniper is just exactly what you think. He's the person that doesn't have a lot of friends because he kills people from far, far, far away. They have special ability marksman talent where they can essentially during in between rests, long or short rests, they can burn these marksman points to pull off special maneuvers like headshots or not winging, but when you I can't think of the name of it, but when you wound somebody, so now they're debilitated, debilitating shots. So now they are running at half speed, so they can't run away, or any other sorts of special maneuvers that you can imagine a sniper doing. They are a high damage outputting character class. They just don't have a lot of armor, and they don't have a higher rate of fire like the grounder or the heavy does, or even the gunslinger, but they make up for it with their marksman talent to do that extra damage. The next one in the class section and the last one is the techie. This is another one of our non-combatants. In a way, he's kind of a hybrid. He's everything you would imagine with a techie. He's good at hacking computers. He's good at fixing machinery. He's able to do maybe boost items or, sit there and defuse nuclear bombs, that sort of thing. One of the cool traits that the techie has that definitely sets him apart is he can sit there, take a favorite weapon, like say, for some reason you love the Taurus Judge, and he basically can sit there and modify it, and as they describe it, essentially put a red button on there. When he hits that red button, he can perform special attack abilities with that weapon. Basically, he's souping it up, so he's got a special pistol or a rifle, whatever it is. That's what I love about the techie, is that you can really basically modify your favorite weapon. One thing that they put in there of note is when it comes to the techie and the medic, is don't be afraid to spend your special points during the game session to use your special abilities, because your team will really benefit from it, and all it takes is a short rest or a long rest to recover those abilities. I mean, still spend them wisely, but don't sit there and hoard it, and then at the end of the game session you're like, well, I could have used this, but I was afraid not to. I didn't know if I'll need it later. Just go ahead and use it, and everybody will be very happy with you, and your party will probably survive a little bit more. All right, so moving on, we're going to move from classes to archetypes. Now here is where we get some big differences with Dungeons and Dragons, the high fantasy setting, and Ultramodern 5. In Dungeons and Dragons, every class has multiple archetypes that they can take, but they're restricted. So you can't take an assassin for your druid, or you can't be, say, a hexblade for your paladin. Which in Dungeons and Dragons that works, but in this game, in this setting, you have about 30 different archetypes, and you can mix them. If you want to have a medic that's also an anti-hero, or say a techie that is, just find one here, is a gun dancer. There are so many different combinations, and you are not restricted by class or race or ladders, what we talked about earlier. You're not restricted by this. The only restriction you do have is you have to wait till 3rd level to get it. Now they do, with all these archetypes, they do have recommended classes that will benefit from the abilities that you get as an archetype, that are going to give you some better synergy for your class, but it's not required. The only thing that might hinder your selection of archetypes is your GM. If it doesn't fit the setting, you don't have mechs to pilot, having a mech pilot or a technomancer or something that's not in your campaign setting, well, you're not going to have access to it. But essentially, you have access to everything that's available. All right, so what I'm going to do with the archetypes, if you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, you know what an archetype is. For those of you not familiar, it's the difference between saying, well, I'm playing a fighter. It's a very generic class. That's a very basic class. To, I want to be a samurai. That's a very specific one. That would be like an archetype. So you're going from a very basic warrior, basic fighter, to a very specific trained swordsman, being a samurai, or say a soldier, your basic grunt, to be in special forces. So that's what these are. These are specializations for your class. And then as you level up, your archetype is going to give you special abilities as you level up. So not only are you getting special abilities from your ladder, you're getting them from your class, and if you take an archetype, you're going to get archetype abilities. So you are going to have a very awesome character, and everything essentially stacks. So I'm just going to read over the archetypes. I'm not going to go into depth on them because I'll be here all night talking about them in depth, but there's 28 of them. There's the anti-hero, the authority, Bannerhead, the Brawler, the Brother of Blood, the Cleaner, the Country Gunman, the Diplomat, the Driver, Field Machinist, Field Medic, Grand Master, Gun Dancer, Infantry Support Specialist, the Machine of War, Man-at-Arms, Pathfinder, Pistolier, Recon Intelligence, Ring Fighter, Sapper, Selfless, Protector, Skirmisher, Suave, and then when we get to Magic section, there's the Dark Slinger and the Technomancer. So you can see that there are a lot of combinations, and this is where we're getting our around 35,000 different possible character combinations, really more than that. Like I said, when we add in the backgrounds and all the variant versions of the different races. But you can see that you are going to be able to make a very unique character unlike any other game. All right, so that, like I said, archetype we're going to go over real quick. Let's get to gear, because this is another one of those things that's kind of a bread and butter. This is what people want to talk about. As you can see, we've got guns, because we're doing Ultramodern. We're doing sci-fi, post-apocalyptic, Western, Weird West, whatever your setting is. We use guns, grenades, missile launchers, power armor, mechs, the whole works. So that's what we're going to be covering here. Now, a couple of things to note is that in this setting, firearms works a little bit differently. As I already mentioned, firearms have a lower damage dice, and that's mainly because, as I said before, your classes and your archetypes can boost or will boost your damage output. So it'll look like, man, why is a pistol only doing a little bit of damage, like a D6 damage or D8 damage, where in Dungeons and Dragons it does like 2D10 damage? There's a reason behind all that, and that comes from your character classes and your special abilities and your ammo and all the different mods that you can put on your weapon. Another thing to note is that your strength, your physical strength, can determine if a weapon is too heavy for you to use without some negatives, or it's very light, or maybe even a normal heavier weapon is considered a light weapon for you. Like a really super high strength person could sit there in one hand a double barrel shotgun, perhaps. Where, you know, somebody that's not so weak, they're going to have to brace it, that sort of thing. Another thing is that, and I want to stress this because people will, I overlooked it several times when I read this. And in the equipment section, they go over the firearm proficiency in more detail. Something that you can do with the firearm proficiency is you can sacrifice or take a penalty, a -5 penalty to your attack roll, and instantly add, if you're successful in striking your opponent, add 10 damage to your attack. So plus 10 damage, taking more of a precision shot. Yeah, there's that penalty of -5, but doing 10 damage on top of your dice damage on type of your special abilities, you can see how lethal ranged combat can be in this system. So that's another reason why you have that reduction in the damage dice of weapons. Another thing is there are 3 different types of armor, using armor in this game system. The first one is the very traditional one for Dungeons and Dragons. Armor provides an armor class. This determines, hey, am I going to get hit? Am I not going to get hit? And that's where it stops. So if you're used to that, like I think chainmail armor gives you +4 to your armor class on top of your dexterity. All that gets added to a 10 to determine what your armor class is. And it's the same thing here. Now, the first optional version for armor is in the gear section, and this kind of this is a different variation. Your natural armor class goes from a base 10 to a 12, plus any of your attribute bonuses like strength or dexterity or constitution. You can actually take your highest of those and swap it with dexterity. So if you have a high constitution but a low dexterity, you can put your constitution in. It basically looks like how you can shrug off, it's just a flesh wound, that sort of thing. And now what armor will do for you, though, it will give you damage reduction. It'll reduce the amount of damage. Now, this first optional version of your armor class It doesn't provide a lot of armor or damage reduction, but it is there, and it is a wonderful, unique feature to Ultramodern 5. The other version I'm going to get to later on, but it's for hardcore mode. So if you love playing your video games on hardcore, then you might like the hardcore mode. All right, so I don't have to go into too much with the weapons and armor, but it has, actually, let's see how many pages. I'm going to check how many pages. But essentially, if you can think of the gun, they have it. Now, they do put a lot of generic weapon names like pistol, heavy pistol, assault rifle. But it doesn't take much for you to go, well, I want to have a G36 rifle with an underslung grenade launcher. Okay, you could totally do that. That's totally on you. Now, the gear section, this is a very robust gear section where other games are very kind of light. This one is about 60 pages worth of equipment and explanations of the equipment. But they talk about the new weapon properties, different types of ammunition, special weapons. And we're talking weapons from like your basic revolver up to bioorganic weapons, quantum entanglement weapons, laser rifles, for something a little bit more sci-fi, mundane-ish, plasma rifles, and all those special things. And they're not geared. There's nothing restricting your characters from starting off with a plasma pistol, which sounds like absolutely incredible. How does this normal guy have a plasma pistol? Well, a lot of these weapons, especially weapons like the plasma weapon, or maybe a laser, quantum diffuser, atomizer, whatever. I'm making up some names here, but these weapons will have some special abilities that only unlock once you become familiar with the weapon. And the way they do that is once you hit a certain level, and most of them I'm seeing around 9th level, your character is able to unlock a special ability. I believe the plasma weapon, I can't remember the name for what they're doing, but essentially it adds a whole new special effect when you do damage to your opponent. But you can't get that until you reach a certain level later on. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to get a special ability or feat or skill to do it. It's just something that unlocks you, become familiar with the weapon, you understand how it works, and you're able to pull off these special effects with the weapons. Now, as I check chat real quick, I just want to make sure. All right. One of the things about the gear is they have everything based on a tech level. So there's all the way from tech level 0 to tech level 5. Now, each of those, they give kind of a broad century period for you to use, and your GM's the one that's going to set the standard for your setting. So you might be in modern day, like right here, right now, and you might not have access to tech level 5. You might not have the quantum entanglement atomizer blaster or the BFG. You might not have access to that because it's tech level 5 and it doesn't exist. But if you're playing the game, you're in your tech setting. If there's those weapons available, they've got those listed by the tech setting. Now, our present day, 21st century, that would be between tech level 2 and tech level 3. There's some stuff in tech level 3 that are a little bit more down the road, but it's stuff that we're actually working on weapon-wise, armor-wise, equipment-wise. So it's not too far-fetched, but you're not going to have a plasma sword right now in the 21st century. So everything like that is geared toward, or it's going to be regulated by your game master. Another thing I liked about the equipment section is an optional purchasing thing. So let's say you're at tech level 4 and everybody's got laser rifles. It's very easy to go buy a laser rifle, say $1,000 for a laser rifle. Well, why would I want spend $1,000 on a laser rifle where this assault rifle is $1,000? Why would I want $1,000 assault rifle when I get $1,000 laser rifle? So what they'll do is these lower tech level is there's a price reduction. They actually have a little bit of a calculation, very easy to do. If you got a calculator, you can do it. Some of you will probably be able to do it in your head, but you can basically get older technology cheaper. So there becomes a reason to buy that Smith and Wesson 44 Magnum revolver over this plasma pistol. It's cheaper. It doesn't do as much damage, but it's still a lethal weapon, and you can afford it. Or maybe it just fits your character's personality. You love old weapons instead of all these newfangled laser rifles and bioorganic weapons. They also have in there all sorts of different armor, explosive, heavy weapons, all sorts of wonderful gear, cybernetics, bioorganic style cybernetics, nanite, the whole works. And it really, that comes down to what your setting is. You know, are cybernetics in the future bioorganic? Or is everything a nanite? Like if you've watched the Bloodshot movie that just came out with Vin Diesel, you'll have an idea what I'm talking about. Force fields. They have all sorts of vehicles, ground vehicles, air vehicles, and modifications for vehicles and weapons. You want to put scopes on your weapons. You want different types of ammunition. These are all available to you. So you can really customize your gear, especially if you like playing games like video games like The Division 1 and 2, where you can sit there, and there's plenty of other shooters that are like this, but you can sit there and modify your weapon, put on a different stock, put on a different magazine or compensator on the front. You can do that with this game. Now, it might not have full detail, or not everything might have special abilities, but you have that option to really specialize your individual firearms or knives, daggers, whatever it is that you are you're using. So the equipment section, like I said, very robust, over 60 pages worth of gear. All right, so I'm going to spend just a very little bit of time, because I'm looking at my time here, and I'm kind of crunched for time. So Mecha is an entire different set of rules. Now, you don't have to use these, especially if they don't fit your system. The Mecha, it's everything from running around in a suit of power armor, like, say, Space Marines or Iron Man, all the way up to running around with Gypsy Danger from Pacific Rim or Gundam. And you can specialize each of these, or especially build each of your mecha if your GM allows it. And as you level up, and as your mech levels up, you can add on more and more parts, get better parts, better components, and it really benefits you to really think long and hard about how you want to specialize your mech, because there are so many options, so many multipliers that you can add on to your mech. And you might be like, well, I'm a first level nobody. How am I going to be able to afford a suit of power armor, a mech? That's up for your GM to figure out. If he is putting mechs in your game, that's for him to figure out how you guys are going to get mechs in the game, how they're going to interact, how you're going to pay for repairs, how you're going to do all of that. Let them figure it out. Your job is just to personalize your mech. Now, you might be thinking, well, you know, how are we going to fight? Like, just an example, I'm going to be running around in a suit of power armor, or say Gypsy Danger level or Gundam style mech, and we're fighting goblins. It doesn't seem really fair. And we really can't go up against, say, a Tarask. I'm just using Dungeons & Dragons level characters, or a dragon, because they're too powerful for my first level character. Well, your mech has a level. There's a mech level. So the mech is basically going to be fighting at a different level creatures than what you individually would have. So all your mental abilities, all your skills are applied to the physical abilities of your mech. And that's how you're going to be able to fight those more dangerous, higher level creatures, by being a lower level character. And then there's a way for they go into description. Once again, this is something that the GM has to worry about, not you as a player. How, you know, you're at first level fighting a dragon, and now you've got all this experience where you could instantly level up to like a 10th level character from killing a elder great red dragon or whatever. They take care of that for you. It's all worked out. The math is simple. It's for the GM to worry about, not you. You just have to worry about, what does your mecha look like? What can it do? What options do you want to put in it? And I'm talking, you could put everything from different types of actuators, different types of armor, weaponry, engines, shields, forms of transport. Do you want your mech to have treads? Does he have legs, spider legs? Can he transform? That sort of thing. That's what you can do with this section, and it is very, very detailed, but it's probably the most complicated section. So it's one of those you're gonna have to read over a couple times, maybe. Maybe I'm just not too smart, and I have to read over it a couple times to really understand it. And where other people can zip through it and go, oh, that's easy. You just do X, Y, and Z, and you're done. I'm going through the entire alphabet trying to connect the dots. So it is a little bit more complicated, or I should say not complicated. It's a little bit more involved than, say, making a regular character, because there are so many components and factors and calculations you have to take into account when you're making your mech. All right, so moving on. All right, so here is the magic. And now this is the last bit of character stuff that we're going to talk about. In the magic section, magic has... They do magic way different than your normal fantasy style magic, which is based around Vancian style. Vance, and I cannot remember the name of the gentleman that came up with it, but basically this is what you think of magic. Oh, I've got a spell book. I've got to memorize my spells. I've got to say some magic words or use a wand or whatever, hocus pocus, and zap people. That is the Vancian style magic. This one, they call it the dark, and essentially you are channeling this very natural energy source that can be measured, can be siphoned, can be stored scientifically. You're channeling it to pull off fantastic, extraordinary abilities. Now the magic is different. You don't have the high magic that you do in Dungeons and Dragons. You know, you're not sitting there casting, dropping a comet from the heavens, or casting a wish spell, or doing a mass resurrection of dead bodies, that sort of thing. Some of that is possible, but you don't have the 9 different levels of spells. You don't have the different type of like arc magic or anything like that. Now, the magic is still there. It is still very powerful. It just takes on a new form. So the first thing I should mention about magic is that it utilizes a new attribute. And this is up to the GM, especially if magic is not in your setting, or if it is in your setting. The GM has the ability to go, hey, we're going to add this new attribute called Vigor, and it's a new attribute you can roll your dice for to see what your attribute is, if that's how you're doing it, or if it's a point buy, however it is that you guys are determining your attributes. They have the rules in there to discuss how you go about doing it. They talk about the main, I think a lot of people, the unofficial roll 46, take or drop the lowest. If you're doing the point buy, you actually add on 3 more points to your pool of points that you can purchase your attributes at, that sort of thing. Now, the Vigor is basically, it's for casting magic. You don't use it for anything else. If you're not a magic user, you really don't need it. Now, the Vigor has 3 different value. Well, it's got its main attribute, but from it, you're going to derive 3 different things. The first thing is the vessel, and this is how much power you have. This is a measurable number. It's replenishable. There's other ways, as you burn it, there's other ways for you to gain it besides just resting. And this is what you use to empower your magic. So you're not just sitting there, casting magic missile over and over and over and over again freely without any limits. This puts limits on what you can do, and that does go up as you level up. The next attribute, or next resource, that's a better term, that you have for Vigor is called your asset. This is like your money. This is for your spells. This is how you purchase your magical abilities. So as you level up from very first level all the way up, you're going to add points to your asset. And you can bank this, you can hold on to it so you can get more powerful abilities later. It's your soul currency, it's your magic currency that you can use strictly for buying new magical abilities. And it's just a way for them to It's just a unique system for them. The last one is called the River. This is a part of the Vigor that it's kind of cool. This is kind of like how many spells that you might know that they're called like quick spells or instantaneous spells. And they basically, if it's like less than a minute, if a spell's less than a minute, then you to cast it. You know, some of those spells out there, rituals and such, take a longer time to cast. If it's under a minute, it now becomes an action. If it was an action, now it's becomes a bonus action, or it's an instantaneous effect, that sort of thing. So basically, how many spells do you have that are that you're able to just instantly burn off as a bonus action or something like that? So you'll be able to cast multiple spells very, very quickly. A couple other things to talk about with Magic is the class. They have a couple new backgrounds in here, but they have a ladder, that new ladder ability called the Occultist, which anybody can get, but is really geared towards the Magi, which is the new class. And as you can suspect, the Magi is all about casting spells. Delving into magic, or whatever you call magic in a game. You could call it psionics if you wanted to. That's how versatile this system is. If you don't want to call it high magic or dark magic or whatever, call it psionics, call it channeling, whatever it is that you want to call it, you can call it that. You can call it a superpower for all they care, as long as you have a system to operate on. Now, the Magi class, as I said, you get to do all those wonderful things with these special abilities. They also have two archetypes, the Dark Slinger and the Technomancer. The Dark Slinger is kind of like a combat version of the Magi, and the Technomancer is the blending of technology and magic. One of the things that I should mention about the magic section is there are still magic weapons. There are still magic armor and items. They are just not as plentiful as they are in Dungeons and Dragons. They're more limited. They're more a smaller, finite amount, very unique. They also have magical gear and essentially magical cybernetics. I'll let you read that and figure out how that works out. All right, so that's essentially character creation. Now, we're not done, but I just want to let you know that that's the end of character, of the options that you have for character creation. So you have 10 races. You have about 10 backgrounds, 10 different ladders that you can take, or different life paths. I like that better than ladders. You have 12 different classes, and you have about 30 archetypes that you can take for your character. So that's around... doing the math, it's about 35,000 different possible combinations. Actually, as I said many times before already, there's actually more than that when you take into account the different variant races, picking the different abilities for the variant races. So the combinations are, I would actually put in the 100,000 range. So you're going to have fun putting together a character. Now, it might sound like a lot. I know I'm throwing out there thousands of different options. It's not thousands of options. It's just thousands of possible combinations, just like Dungeons and Dragons. Because you can have an elf that's a wizard, that's a former soldier as their background. That's also a samurai, or not a wizard samurai, but a wizard, whatever, archmage. So there are those options to take. They're still there. I'm just trying to give you guys how many options are actually available to you. So it's very easy to do. You just pick a race that you like, pick a class that you like, and fill in the blanks. Very easy peasy. All right, so moving on. Antagonists. These are your bad guys, your creatures, your NPCs, which are your non-player characters for the youths that are not familiar with it. They've got over 100 different antagonists in there. Hitting pretty much all the different genres. They have a couple setting specific creatures here, like the Ascendants, which I kind of look kind of like celestial beings, maybe alien celestial beings. They have kaiju in there. Remember, we get to play mechs if you're doing mechs in your game. They have types of kaiju. They have aliens like bioorganic, or mixture of not bioorganic. Techno-organic. I can't believe I've been saying bioorganic this whole time. Techno-organic creatures, like think about the Borg, or like what you're seeing on the screen there. You know, a little bit of organics mixed in with mechanical stuff. So you have plenty of creatures to choose from. Not only do you have plenty of creatures in here to choose from for your setting, but if you have that Dungeon Master's Guide and you want to take a creature, like say, I don't know, pick anything and rename it, just use its attributes, its statistics, and you've got yourself another creature to add to your pool. Especially if you have a favorite one, you have your, like, maybe you like demons in Dungeons and Dragons. You love those creatures and you want to bring them over, but you don't want them to be demons. Make them aliens and just change how they look and give them different names. You're done. It's that easy. If you don't want to use any of their antagonists, whatever it is that you want to do for your campaign setting that you've been thinking about, it's like, man, if I could come up with my own game setting and make, you know, millions of dollars off of, what would I do? Oh, I would do this, this, and this, and you'd be able to do this. I would have these creatures in there, or be on this alien planet, that sort of thing. This is your time to shine, guys. Start taking all those notes that you've written, all those ideas that you have, put it into basically some sort of document, and start world building. All right, moving on. This is probably the last of the most important things I should talk about. I'm going to go over everything else still, but Ultramax is hard mode. It is hardcore mode, insane mode, suicide mode, whatever mode whatever your favorite console game or computer game is that's got the most ridiculous hard settings, survival mode, whatever. This is Ultramax. If you want to play on hard, this is what you're going to do. This rule set, let's see if I can find my notes here. This rule set really, I'm just going to kind of glaze over it. Advantage and disadvantage, normally in Dungeons and Dragons or even in Ultramodern 5, if you have advantage or disadvantage, you get to roll a dice and you have to take the higher or lower of the two. Like if you have disadvantage, you have to take the worst result. If you have advantage, you can take the best result. In this, and that's where it stops. You don't have multiple advantage disadvantages. In this, your advantages and disadvantages stack. So you might have 3 levels of advantage. That means you're rolling 3 20-sided dice and taking the best. You might have 4 disadvantage dice. So you're rolling 4 disadvantage dice and taking the worst of the 4. All those stack up. You start off with more hit points, but your hit points, as you level up, it's decreased. And hit points, once you have your total amount of hit points, you basically divide your hit points up into 4 different categories, basically 4 different wound categories. And as you take damage, you move down or up, however you want to look at that, from the lightest or no wounds to light wounds to heavy wounds to mortal wounds. And each of those, you get more detrimental effects added to your actions. Because you're bleeding out, you're taking lots of physical damage, you're dying, and there's going to be some effects on you. It's going to be harder to aim, it's going to be harder to move, you're going to be bleeding out, you're going to be taking more damage until you address that situation. Armor class, this is that other option I was talking about with armor class. In this one, you're going to increase your armor class even more. So instead of normally being a base 10, or that option, which I really recommend if you're just doing basic Ultramodern, I really recommend you going with that base, that optional value of everybody starts at a 12, and your armor actually adds on damage reduction, or reduces damage. In this one, you actually have a base of 14, and plus your dexterity or constitution, whatever, and then any situational modifiers like, oh, I'm behind cover, that sort of thing. Running is a big thing. If you're running, dodging, you're prone and people are shooting at you, it becomes harder to hit you. And then armor will stop X amount of damage from, if you are hit, from injuring you. Now some armor, and they have this in here, some armor is better against some weapons and weaker against others. And if it's weaker, more damage is going to go through. If it's stronger, less damage will go through. Essentially, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's essentially what is happening. Teamwork becomes a huge thing in Ultramax. It becomes you really need to be smart. Now, if you want to pick on your players and you don't have no problem killing off characters left and right, use Ultramax, but you're probably going to burn out your players. Now, if you have a very good group, very smart group that plays not just aggressively and I hate to say it, stupidly, where they just run blindly in and set off all the traps and they pull a Leroy Jenkins. If you have a group that doesn't do that sort of thing and they're very smart, they're very tactical, very strategic, very cautious while they're role playing, Ultramax might be for them. It really puts a sense of mortality, lethality into the setting over regular Ultramodern or Dungeons and Dragons. They still have the death saving throw modifiers. You still roll to see if you're going to die, that sort of thing. It's just easier to die, and it's easier to kill people kill not people but NPCs or monsters, whatnot. So Ultramax is definitely hardcore mode. I'm not going to go into super detail about it because I want to save it for you guys. All right, we are almost done. So just like any other role-playing game out there, they always have a section there about, hey, if you're going to be playing this game, let's talk about adventuring. Now, this is mainly for the game master, but I highly recommend that players read the adventuring section because you'll be able to see what it is the GM is trying to accomplish while he's running this event. Even if you've been playing role-playing games for years and you were like, oh, I know what this means, I don't need to read over, that's for him. Take your time to read over it because there are things in there that you're going to realize that could really benefit your play, how you play the game, how everybody else benefits from how you're playing the game, and have that shared group experience, and how you can help the GM along the way. Because your GM, they spend about 3-4 hours working on this game, or maybe even more, every week or every other week to sit down and play with you guys. And if they don't have, they're investing their time and energy where you just have to show up and play your character. They're spending their time. So if you can help them play the game a little bit better, play a little bit smarter, and actually get involved into it, it would be very helpful. And then you can also kind of see what it is they're going through when they put together the games. Please read it. So you don't have to, but it's definitely in there. And basically, for those of you who are not familiar, these type of sections are always named differently: campaign, how to run a game, adventuring. It's essentially a way to how the game is played. Do you want to do a campaign, which is a series of stories? Do you want to do sandbox, which is kind of an open world, let the players do what they want? Is it a one-shot, one-night adventure, that sort of thing? And how to structure the story, how to put twists and turns, how to include creatures, locations, everything that you want to be able to do to be able to sit down and have a game session. It is definitely a good read for everybody, not just the GM. All right, so these last couple bits is about their couple of their settings that we're going to cover. They have, I think it's like 5 or 6 different settings, but in the book they have 2 that you can really focus on. The first one is Necropolis. Necropolis is a post-apocalyptic Earth. Natural resources are waning. A lot of bad stuff is happening, and there's some sort of unnatural darkness, some ancient evil creatures rising up from the underworld. They really don't. I didn't read totally over everything, but because I didn't want to ruin it for. I didn't want to ruin it at that time because I want to read through it later on and really immerse myself in it, just in case I want to run a group through it. And the players take basically are whatever it is, whatever classes they have. They basically are if you've watched a movie like October Faction, I'm trying to think of some other ones. Basically, they take on the role of a group of individuals that are specialized in dealing with this rising threat, with these creatures, with these people, the cultists, everything that are trying to destroy the world. And you are the frontline fighters. You're solving mysteries, you're battling it out in the streets, and this is a like I said, post-apocalyptic Earth. So lots of you can see flying vehicles on there. So lots of different tech options are available to the characters. It does have a nice creepy post-apocalyptic vibe to it. So if you like that sort of thing, definitely give it a read over. Now, as I said earlier, and I looked over it, I totally forgot to talk about it with the weapons section. In the weapons section, they have multiple charts from manufacturers to different types of weapons to upgrades to special abilities and quirks. So if you like the 6.5 gajillion guns that you can have in Borderlands 1, 2, 3, or the prequel, or the Telltale Tales, whatever it's called, you have maybe not a 6 gajillion, because I'm not sure how to do the math on that, but I would say millions of different weapon combinations. So if you like those weird, wacky weapons, like a submachine gun that shoots out fire, that's a torque brand, whatever, they don't use those name brands, but it has that shoot and loot, or loot and shoot feel to it. So if you want to make a Borderlands game, an RPG, you can do it with that. That's I want to put it out there. Also, they also have stuff in there for steampunk, diesel punk, and also for what they call it atom punk. So if you like Fallout, you can do this game. They've got all the different options in there for you to play. All right, the next one they have, and this is the last part. We're almost done here. Wow, an hour and a half, a little bit longer than I wanted, but it's over a 400 page book, and there's a lot of content to cover. All right, Threshold. Something bad has happened to Earth. Earth is gone. It is essentially translocated somewhere else. Nobody knows where. So all the different colonies in our solar system have reached out to the stars, and bad stuff has happened. Humanity is on the back foot. They're in danger of being wiped out, and they're facing off, as you can see kind of in the picture there, some very creepy alien races. So as the players, and they're essentially scrappers, or maybe they're explorers or something, but it centers around trying to recover lost technology, because humanity lost a lot, and they are basically trying to rebuild the civilization and survive whatever has been destroying worlds. And some of it's partly humanity's fault that this has happened, that this race is here. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm not spoiling anything, but just in case the GM wants to keep that away from you. But it's a really creepy, like survival mode style setting. I really like it. My favorite setting that they have right now, I didn't put it up on here, and it's not included in this book. It's a separate download. It's called Apex, and it is essentially, if you wanted to play a superhero game, you have your superpowers, face off against supervillains, secret organizations, all that sort of thing, Apex will be probably the one you want. And it's a cheap download. I think it's $4.99 on DriveThruRPG. This game, Ultramodern 5, is $19.99 right now on DriveThruRPG.com. You can get it, download. You will not regret getting this. If you love playing a modern game or a sci-fi game, post-apocalyptic game, and you love the Dungeons and Dragons system, but you're tired of playing elven wizards and seeing gnome thieves and halfling paladins run around and fighting the same orcs or dragon horde or whatever it is that you're just tired of the same thing over and over again, but you like the game system, that's what keeps bringing you back. Ultramodern 5 is definitely the game for you because it opens up everything else, leaves high magic behind, a high magic, high fantasy type of setting like Dungeons and Dragons. It leaves it behind and propels you into more modern times or sci-fi times. You want to do a Wild West with Wyatt Earp and werewolves and vampires and skinwalkers and all that kind of thing, you can do it. You want post-apocalyptic Borderlands, yeah, you can do it, guys. You want a big old space opera like Star Wars style, you can do it. So it is. I have a collection of RPGs, just so you guys have a bit of a background why I love RPGs. Like most of you guys, and I said this yesterday when I was doing the test run on the show, like most of you that have miniature, you play the miniature games, that's mainly what we do here on FNP Wargamers. You have tons of miniatures that are unassembled, unpainted. I have tons of unplayed RPGs. I have read through them, but I have so many stacks of RPG books because I just love RPGs. I love reading about them. I love reading the different systems, the different mechanics. Heck, the past year I've been working on my own RPG, and now I've gotten to a point I've got to reach out and get help from other people. And because I'm just I've got to a point where I can't go any further by myself. I need an injection of new blood, which I'm hoping, if everything works out, by the end of the year, we'll go to Kickstarter for it. I've got 3 artists available. I've got a couple of rules writers that were fixing the mechanics. The writing is essentially done. We just have to stretch it out. So we might be seeing that at the end of the year. Anyways, I love RPGs. So when I see one that's really good, like Ultramodern 5, it makes me want to preach to the choir. I want everybody to get a good, solid look at it. And with it only being $19.99 as a digital download, it is, that's cheap. That is so inexpensive for the for an RPG. If you already have a player's handbook for Dungeons and Dragons, you download this, you're done. You don't need anything else. And this book will be published probably around, I'm thinking around summertime. I might be optimistic because the publisher is in China, and if you haven't been paying attention, there's a little thing going on, pandemic, and so a lot of things have slowed down. But as we get through quarantine and all that jazz, they'll eventually pick up. Some work has begun in China. Everything's just going to be on the back foot a little bit. We're going to be delayed probably about a month or two, so probably about summertime. But in the meantime, you will have a digital book, and you can already be playing. You can already be building characters, playing the game. Because once you have the characters built, you really don't need the book anymore. Until people need to advance their characters, you can use your notes, whatever you've done to assemble your campaign. So I hope you enjoyed this. I was a little long-winded. I apologize for that part, but I wanted to get through as much of this as possible. This is absolutely a wonderful game system, and it really is going to open up worlds. And when I say it is a fantastic game, I'm not just spitting nonsense here. This game in 3 months went to platinum sales on DriveThruRPG. Very rarely do games do it that fast or at all. Only 2 other game systems, and I cannot think off the top of my head, and I should have done that in the meantime. Only 2 other game systems using the 5e have managed to go to platinum in that amount of time or have been platinum. So this game is hot. It is really awesome. I would give it a good look over and really grab yourself a group. If you don't want to run it, and if you got a normal GM that wants to run it, then say, hey, if I get this, will you run it? Can we have this game going on? Can we do this? Just get involved with it, guys. You are not going to regret it. All right. I have rambled on long enough, and I have not been checking chat. Okay. I have not been checking YouTube chat, but most people, like Epion said, have gone over to, have come over to Twitch. But I am going to be doing in the future, and probably also with the weekly live show on Mondays and Fridays, Friday mornings, I'll be going over to Twitch. If you guys are new to the channel, please, if you're on Twitch, hit the like and subscribe button. If you don't mind, head over to our YouTube channel, youtube.com slash FNP Wargamers. Hit subscribe. It really helps boost our channel and unlocks more features for us. And once we get to a certain amount of viewers on both of them, we can actually, well, we get some benefits that we'll actually be able to pass on to you all. All right, I'm done running my mouth here. You all have yourself a wonderful day. I will see you tomorrow morning. Next week, next Wednesday at 7 p.m., we are going to be covering another RPG, Tales from the Loop. Watch the preview tonight or the trailer tonight if you want to on YouTube for Tales of the Loop. That's coming to Amazon Prime in April. That's how fast it's coming, guys. All right,